Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Category B packaging and shipping training. We are going to start by doing some discussion first, and just a few words. You should all have been sent a pretest, and there will be a post-course assessment. It's not a test. Nobody's getting graded, and it doesn't need to have a name on it, but we just need to be able to demonstrate that we are improving your knowledge by providing this class. So there's a pre and a post. I want to also say that there are some handouts that you were sent ahead of time. We are just really happy to have you today. Some of the things that you're going to need, hopefully you have some packaging and shipping supplies. I know a couple of you have emailed me that you do not, but hopefully you'll be able to see very clearly as we do these demonstrations later where things go and how to use these mailers. So at this point, I'm just going to get us started. I'm Erin Bowles, and I am our Wisconsin Clinical Laboratory Network Coordinator. Typically, I'm working with the clinical laboratories, so it's really nice to have another group that we're doing some outreach with today. And we're happy to have you, and I will let the rest of the faculty here introduce themselves as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Alana Sterkel. I'm the Associate Director of the Communicable Disease Division at the Wisconsin State Laboratory of Hygiene, and put this together originally because of all the wonderful feedback that we've gotten from our different submitters, local health departments, clinics, vet staff, who needed a resource for packaging and shipping training. So we're really happy to be able to offer this at no charge today, and we'll have everything available on our website during the discussion today and posted afterwards as well, recordings, slides, everything else that we'll have.
Hi, everybody. Joshua Kropp, Supervisor in Communicable Disease. I focus on the support areas, which include specimen receiving and processing, our customer service department, outreach that we do throughout the state and throughout the nation, actually, and the computer systems, our reporting and data.
And my name is Austin Fox. I'm the guy behind the camera today. I work in Communicable Disease Division, support customer service and clinical orders as a microbiologist.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tara Schnell. I'm the shipping trainer specialist. My day job is with the University of Wisconsin-Madison, doing biosafety training and specializing in biological hazardous materials shipping training. So today my role is to go over the transport regulations that the DOT present for us for transport within the United States. We'll go over the compliance and the packaging rules. So let's start with the Category B transport regulations, and then I will kind of give some specific information on what the State Lab of Hygiene prefers with their Category B packages that they receive from you. The topics we're going to hit over today, it's pretty generalized: an overview of the HazMat transport regulations, some infectious substances classification work. It's hard to tell between the A's and the B's where to draw that line. We're going to talk about some packaging basics for any biological transport, and then we'll get into Category B packaging, the State Lab of Hygiene packaging, and we'll talk about dry ice with Category B. We'll touch a little bit on specimens with preservatives. If anybody has specific questions about that, please let us know. I can spend a little more time on that if you really do need it. And then we will, I'll hand things over to Joshua, who will give some information about specimen submission to State Lab of Hygiene, and then we'll go over some hands-on practice with classification and packaging and some scenarios. So we'll start very generally. What is HazMat? So hazardous materials are defined as any substance or material that's capable of posing an unreasonable risk to health, safety, and property when transported in commerce. When you ship internationally, the international regulations come into play, and they call it dangerous goods, not hazardous materials, but we do use these terms internationally, or I'm sorry, interchangeably. There are 9 classes of hazardous materials: explosives, gases, flammable liquids, combustible liquids. You can read them across. The training we're going to focus on today are in the classification of 6.2, infectious substances, and we'll touch on a Class 9 material, and that's just dry ice. We will talk a little bit about preservative solutions that fall into Class 3, I believe. That's the preservative solutions. So once we get into infectious substances, these are biologicals. They are materials known to and reasonably expected to contain a pathogen. And a pathogen is defined in the regulations as a microorganism that can cause disease in humans and or animals. And that includes all of these agents. And it also says other agents in the regulations, meaning any other agent that is infectious that we find out about at a later time can be added to this list. So it's encompassing. Once something is deemed to be an infectious substance, it must be assigned a UN ID number and a proper shipping name. They all will have UN ID numbers and proper shipping names once they're hazardous. So you can be an infectious substance affecting humans, an infectious substance affecting animals, a biological substance category B, which is what we're going to focus on today. And the last category is a regulated medical waste. It's not something that you'll probably run into very often, but you're probably familiar with it. That's sharps containers, red bags from hospitals, from human medical treatments. Once you've classified these materials, it seems pretty easy to move forward, but the difficulty is in really figuring out how to make that distinction between the A's and the B's. So we're going to go over these definitions and the key points, and then we're going to do a little bit of working on how you make these decisions. A key point in the category A definitions, there's a few key words in here that need to be highlighted. When it says when an exposure to it occurs, so it causes this disease and when an exposure occurs. Exposure in the HazMat regulations means exposure during the transport chain, not exposure in the general world or in the laboratory, but just in the transport chain. So it's different. There's a lot of containment during transport. There's certain limited activities. So exposures are not the high risk that they would be in the laboratory or in a hospital setting. The other words I want to highlight are that the substance must be in a form capable of causing this level of disease. The form means the type of specimen. So do you have a culture? Do you have a patient specimen that is blood? Do you have a specimen of lung or liver or skin or stool? The type of the specimen matters when you're thinking about whether it falls into a category A or category B infectious substance. And next, within this definition, so it's in a form capable of causing permanent disability or life-threatening or fatal disease in otherwise healthy humans or animals when exposure occurs. Otherwise healthy means that someone who's not immune compromised, so a normal healthy adult human, a normal healthy adult animal. Not immune compromised, not ill, not infants, children, or elderly. If it causes this level of disease only in people who are immune compromised, it doesn't fit the definition of a category A infectious substance. It is in a category B. So that's the main distinction. Those are really the key words in the definition. There's very few category A infectious substance in the grand scheme of things. A lot of things don't fall into that and don't have to be shipped that way. There's a lot more category B's because everything else that's infectious to humans and animals falls into category B. And it can range from some really nasty agents, from certain types of influenza to MRSA, down to things that are really not all that harmful, like a Coxsackie virus or things like that, that cause pretty treatable disease in most individuals. So it's a very broad range for category B. It's not a downgrade in containment. It's not a downgrade in hazard necessarily. It's just a downgrade in the durability of the packaging that you will use. The containment is still quite good. But how do you really know? The distinction can be really difficult. One of the things that you can do with the category A infectious to make the distinction between these two categories is you use some professional judgment. You have to know what's the known medical history of the patient source, what are the symptoms of that individual, what are the endemic local conditions, is this an area that's high in that agent during a certain time of year, is this a confined high density population where certain things spread more quickly. Those things can matter in making your determination between A and B when you aren't sure. And then other professional judgment, as in, are you a virologist? Do you have access to somebody who's educated in virology, microbiology, or different sorts of pathogens that might have more specialty than you? You can ask questions and use their advisement. But making this distinction can be difficult. The reason it's difficult is because category A's have to take a lot of consideration. They are our highest consequence risk pathogens. The majority of them, when they are shipped, will require some sort of documentation under other regulations. Permits to go interstate or internationally, customs documentations to move in and out of the country. So there's a lot more documentation involved with them than other agents. Oops, my fault. An exposure or release during transport of a category A, if you have an accident and the packaging all breaks open and tubes fall out, something comes open, an incident like that will get a full HazMat response from first responders. Haz suits becomes a very big deal. It's very alarming to individuals. So there's a reason we really want to make our decisions about category A and category B infectious substances. We want to take that with as much thought as possible. We don't want to over-categorize to A just because we feel it's safer if we don't have to do that. Because we don't want a full HazMat response for a relatively low pathogenic bacterium or low pathogen influenza or something like that. When we're making the distinction, it can be hard to know. You have a lot of resources at your fingertips, and so we're going to go through what resources you can use besides your professional judgment, besides patient information that you may have when a specimen comes to you or when you collect a specimen. The first place you should go when you think you might have a category A is you go to this category A example list, and you have a copy of that with your materials. This list is easily accessible online. It's in the DOT regulations, it's in the international regulations. Everything on this list should be shipped as a category A infectious substance with a little bit of a caveat, okay? If you have something like monkeypox virus, it just says monkeypox, there's nothing after it. That means any specimen known or reasonably expected based on patient history and those sorts of categories. If it's known or expected to have monkeypox virus in that specimen, it doesn't matter what kind of specimen, it has to go category A. And the UN number and proper shipping name are right at the top of the blue column. That's what you have to use on your packaging and paperwork, right? So you don't have to make any judgment call. It's kind of a no-brainer list. It's really helpful. You get to other things like poliovirus where it says cultures only in parentheses. What that means is if you have an intentionally propagated specimen, then it must be shipped as a category A infectious substance. And again, the UN number and proper shipping name are at the top of the column, right? If you have a different type of specimen, a patient specimen of some kind, sputum or stool, or maybe some skin or blood, you have to then make a determination. Does it go category A or category B? And you go back to this definition. Is that form of the specimen capable of causing that level of disease in an otherwise healthy person if an exposure occurs during transport? It's a little hard to think about that, but that's what you have to consider. You use all of this information and professional judgment to see if it fits that definition. If it doesn't, then you can ship it a category B. If you feel that it does, then you can ship it as a category A, right? Another thing that can kind of help you with this process, there's a lot of individuals that conduct these types of trainings that truly do go by this rule of if it says cultures only and you don't have a culture, you can automatically ship it as category B. Legally, you can do that. Okay, so I have something that's suspected of having Rift Valley fever virus, and it's a blood specimen. I can ship that category B, and that's perfectly fine. I feel that ethically, you also need to look at that definition and the type of specimen you have, because a lot of specimens can hold way more load of a virus or bacteria than some others. Blood might have more than toenails, right? Or vice versa. So I think you need to think about that and consider it. But when it comes down to it, if you really are still on the fence and it's a cultures only, you can send those patient specimens as a category B. Does that make sense? You can also consult with somebody who's category A certified to ship. I try to advise folks that you should have at least one person on your staff who's category A shipped to help you make these decisions in case you do get a category A infectious substance. But not everybody has the sort of funding to pay for that sort of training. There are online resources that aren't too expensive, and the State Lab of Hygiene will have a course here pretty soon for that. It's web-based. It's, I don't know if there's charges for it, free of charge. So there is category A training available to you if you stay in touch with the State Lab. Otherwise, there's resources online. If you're interested, I can give you some names of places to check online too. It's not terribly expensive, but you do take on some liability when you ship category A, so it's really good to have that information. It's not bad to take one training just to be able to distinguish between them, too, even if you don't plan to ship them. So in this decision, I kind of want to go through what I kind of think of as my decision tree when I look at specimens and how I classify them. So if we step really far back, just look at what you have and ask, is it even a biological material? There's a lot of human pathogens, animal pathogens that exist in soil. So I do get a lot of questions about folks sending soil and asking, well, we know it has this bacteria in it, or it could have it. Well, it's not a biological specimen unless you're shipping that bacteria that you know is there. So it's really kind of a fuzzy line. Those are often regulated by other agencies, not the Department of Transportation. So there's other rules that can cover some of those samples. If it's not biological, it's not falling into the infectious substances classification, all right? So that's something that may fit another hazard. You'll have to do other work to figure out where that falls under whatever it might be regulated for moving to place in samples. Once you've decided it is a biological specimen from a human or an animal, then you have to decide if it's infectious to humans. If it's infectious. If it's not, it's not an infectious substance. If it is, it's one of the category A or the category B, right? There's a lot of biologicals that are non-infectious to humans or animals that you might ship, or they're not expected to be infectious. A lot of patient specimens sent for screening testing without any suspect agents in them can be shipped as a non-infectious substance, and you would categorize them in the US going by ground, like by a courier, you can call them nothing. They're actually not regulated at all. But you can also call them a category B, just for safe shipping, and if you want to send them with other samples. So it's fine to call them a category B. You can also use the international terminology and call them an exempt human specimen or exempt animal specimen, which the international regulations, if you've heard of the IATA, tells you that for air transport, that you give them that proper shipping name, but they're not hazardous, but they still want you to package them responsibly. So they tell you how to package them. So the exempt specimen shipping is really very useful. It's very much like the category B, is just without the extra UN number labels and things. So it's good information to have. It'll follow the same sort of packaging that we're going to go over a little bit later. Once you've decided it's infectious, then you kind of have to go through a tree of decisions. If you're infectious, already went through that. If it's on the category A list, yes or no. If it's on the list, automatically it's a category A if it doesn't say cultures only, right? If it says cultures only, then you have to think again, do you have a culture? If yes, it's a category A. These are easy decisions, and you don't have to ship it if you're not trained to ship it. The buck stops there. If it's not a culture, you again have to make those professional decisions and figure out where it falls with the definitions and decide if you want to go A or B. And that gets to be up to you or to whoever might be trained for category A shipping can assist you with that. If it's not on the category A list, if it doesn't fit that definition of category A, then it is a category B. Most things will easily fall into category B pretty quickly that way. If it doesn't fit that definition of category A, but you're still on the fence, you're not really sure where you should be with packaging it, if you're sending it to the State Lab of Hygiene, call them and ask. If it's a cultures only and you have a patient specimen and you're sending it to the State Lab of Hygiene, if you aren't sure where you draw that line, call them and ask. They may want to receive it a certain way, and they can advise you on that. They have certified category shippers all over this place. There's many, many, many of them. They have good information they can share with you. Other resources that you have, if it's not a state lab specimen, they probably won't advise you on how to ship it, but you can call your other recipients and maybe they'll have advisement to you. You can use clinical labs that may be near you, hospital labs, they may have some advisement or somebody who can help you ship it. They can't tell you how to ship it, but they could train you or they could ship it for you, right? Category A, the reason I keep bringing it up, even though we're not training for it, is that I want you to understand the burden involved with it. There's a lot of resources online where you could get enough information to be able to ship a category A. You could order a shipping kit, and you could think that you're okay to do it. But unless you've had formal training with a certificate, within the last 24 months, you can't. It's illegal. Category B, what we're going to be going over today, and exempt specimens, you can read information online and buy a kit, and you can ship them without formal training. However, if you don't have formal training, how do you make these decisions between an A and a B? How do you really know what's the right information? So it is actually useful to get some formal training at least once every few years to just sort of keep your skills up and see if there's any changes. Because if something changes, how would you know if you don't keep up regular training? So I just like to kind of keep that up, that it's only trained persons who can classify, package, do paperwork, and ship them. You have to renew every 24 months, and there's no flexibility in that if you want to keep shipping them. If you're out of training, then you cannot be shipping them or advising on shipment or even do paperwork for them. And you have to maintain your own knowledge. If things change during your period between your trainings, you still have to know what those changes are. There's no exceptions usually. The compliance for Category A is the same as compliance for if you're shipping chemicals. It is stringent. It's the full DOT regulations for hazardous materials or the international regulations for anything that's going overseas. You have to have documents retained for 2 years. Have you seen the paperwork with the red stripes on the sides? That's that hazardous materials documentation that you would have to have, and you have to keep it. It's subject to inspections and document audits, and when they inspect, these agencies really drill down into what you're shipping, and once they look at one thing, they can look at everything. And it's many different federal and international agencies, from the DOT to the FAA, Secret Service, CDC, NIH, FDA, all the letters, and then even internationally too, the IATA, the ICAO, which is a UN agency. All of them can come looking at things if they choose and impose fines to different agencies if they choose. And the fines can be as, what seems as, it's painful because it can be just leaving off one number off of your UN number, and there's $5,000 to $10,000 of fines right there. So it's not something you want to take lightly for Category A's. And it's not meant to scare you, it's just meant to, that it is serious. It's not something you do without really formal training. So we want to work through, if you're not trained in Category A's, what do you do? Where do you go for resources? Number one, if you're not trained to ship them, it's kind of a hard stop. You have to figure out what you're going to do. So there's sort of 5 different lines of thinking that I could kind of come up with for this training. Number one, you ask a Category A trained person. If you have one on site, great. If you don't, then you need to find somebody to give you some advice. If you're shipping to the State Lab of Hygiene, you can call them and ask them how they want to save their specimens and if they have any special packaging that you might need. Say you're shipping somewhere else and you need to figure this out, you can just go get some training yourself. If you don't have time to wait for the free class, there's online trainings you can take. They may not be as robust as you might want in the long run, but in the short term, it may help you get from point A to point B with your Category A. There's some cost to the training, and there's always a burden of compliance for liability and that sort of thing if something goes wrong, but it's cheaper to know it than to not know and do it wrong. You can hire an outside courier service to ship it for you. It is expensive, but the courier assumes all roles of a Category A shipper, from packaging your specimen to labeling it to shipping it and doing all of the paperwork for you. And sometimes some couriers will also work with your permits and any international documents you may need. They can help you with those. It is more expensive, but you get quite a bit of service for it. And if you don't do this very often, there's sometimes where that might be worth it. It's just sort of up to you to figure those things out. And that last item, it may not be an option to you, but I always like to point out that you can just not ship that specimen and then figure out how you're going to make something work. Maybe your submitter who sent it to you or brought it to you, maybe they have to figure out what they're going to do with it and you're going to destroy the specimen they sent you. Or you have to store it for a while until you figure out what you're going to do. There has to be something that you can figure out. And yeah, that's always an option to not ship the specimen, but that's not always the business practice that we are being held to, right, as we move forward. Pardon my voice. So for packaging, for any biological, when I do my regular trainings on campus, I really push that for any biological, whether or not it's regulated, you have a 3-layer format for shipping. You have a specimen container, or we call it a primary container, that should be leak-proof. You have a secondary container that should be leak-proof or sift-proof for a solid. And then you have an outer container that should be durable. Hard-sided for things that are more hazardous, but it can be a durable envelope for things that are less hazardous, right? And it needs to have a securely lidded closure and enough room on it for clearly laid out labels, not just cobbled together, all right? And that means they're sort of like you can't use the paper bag method of throwing a paper bag and wad it up and tape it closed and ship it. That's not something you want to do even for non-hazardous biologicals. And it seems absurd that people would do that, but you use what you have on hand. The more hazardous your material, the more durable the packaging needs to be. For categories B and A, you have to have some sort of kit that's been verified that that secondary container and the outer container function together to pass durability standards. The standards are very high to a UN standard for a category A, and they're less rigid, less stringent for a category B. And then for anything that's exempt or unregulated, there's no standards for packaging, but you just want to have good size packages that are nice and durable and will make it to your destination without being squashed or crushed or messing up the samples inside. So at that point, it becomes what's the safety for the handler and what's going to keep my samples, keep the sample integrity to their destination. So right now, I'm going to have you participate with me a little bit, those of you who have packing materials. We're going to do a little bit of hands-on instead of just listening to my slowly dying voice. So we have here on site, we have a packaging kit and we have labels with Velcro that we can stick on the outside of the box. If you don't have Velcro that you can use, we can just kind of use our imaginations. And I didn't set this up before I started, did I? We have a cooling pack that comes with the State Lab of Hygiene kit. We have a sample bag, some absorbent material, and specimen tubes. So now if we're looking at the different kinds of specimen containers, these are all primary containers. Right? Now, you want your primary container to be leak-proof under any circumstances, okay? So no matter how you ship it, you don't want it to be able to bust open. These nice screw-top tubes are even hard to unscrew. These are not going to leak. They can even probably rattle around and are still going to be intact. This is a very good shipping container for a primary container for ground shipment or even air. Something like these, where it's a little bit more of a stopper tube, that was useful. These will stay pretty secure under ground transport, but if something freezes, if you fill it too high and it freezes, you could push that lid right off. The same with these. These can pop off. If you transport them by air, they can pop off completely just by pressure changes, which makes sense. Some of these others, like conical tubes, these are good for transport. They have a nice screw top to them. So just think about what you're transporting and how durable it is. If it is not nice and leak-proof on its own, you need to do something to make it leak-proof, all right? So the State Lab uses these nice screw-top tubes. You don't have to do anything to this to make it leak-proof. It's good. And that's why they use them, because it's durable and they're easy to receive. If you have something like a stopper top tube, you want to do something to keep it closed. I recommend parafilm or some tape around the top. You can just wrap it over the top or circular, and that will keep it closed. You don't have to put a ton on there. You can make it relatively simple. Be aware that your recipient may not want you wrapping every single tube in parafilm. If you're sending 25 specimens to one location, they might not want you doing that because it's going to slow them down on the receiving end. So just give them a call and ask them. It's like, how would you like us to make these leak-proof? How can we secure the caps? There might be another way that they would recommend. There's a lot of different options you can use. So once you have, I'm going to keep hold of these. Once you have these leak-proof, then you want to put them in a secondary container. There's different types of secondary containers. You can have bags. So this is good for ground transport. It's a nice Ziploc bag. It's not going to leak. You can test them. If you aren't sure if they're going to be leak-proof, get some air in it, close it, see if you can push air through. Don't pop it, because then it's obviously not leak-proof. Okay, if you can't push air through, it's going to be leak-proof for your ground transport. There's also hard-sided containers. I think I have one in here. that work very well for secondary containers. They are obviously leak-proof because they have a nice screw-top lid. Oh, that's going to stick. It's a nice screw-top lid. This is going to stay closed and not knock open. It's a good secondary container. You can use envelopes for air transport. Use this one. These are meant to be more durable, and you can see it's a much thicker plastic than these specimen bags. So these are meant to withstand air and temperature changes during flight, so they won't bust open, which is very useful. You don't want these leaking. One of the little pitfalls of these is that if they're the sticky top ones like you have, they can be hard to close once you have them full because they're lumpy, right? There's a technique to close them that's hard to overlook, and I did that exactly on this one. I'm going to say it was on purpose. There's a little square and a little star. You fold it to the square meets the star, and it should be a leak-proof seal. But you only get one chance at sealing these properly. If there's zipper options for these that you can purchase, I would recommend those over the sticky ones, but sometimes you don't have a choice on what you're getting. So I'm going to go ahead. We're preparing this for the State Lab of Hygiene, so I'm going to go ahead and use their tube and their specimen bag. You want to put that into the specimen bag, but you also need to have cushioning and absorbent material. This serves as an absorbent material, but it's probably not enough cushioning, so you can put more pieces in there in the bag if you choose, or some bubble wrap or paper towels, something like that. Is that acceptable? You can set them in just like this, and that should be fine. If you're sending it to other places, your recipients will often want to receive them a certain way, so ask them how they want you to do it. But kind of by a standard, if you're not sure, you can always wrap them in your absorbent material to make sure they're cushioned and the lids are protected from any breakage. So I used to just take paper towels, very simple, roll it up, and just a tiny piece of tape right there, and you can stick it in. The State Lab would prefer you don't do that, and probably some other large receivers don't want that because then they're unrolling tons and tons of tubes, which is completely understandable. That takes a lot of time. But one tube to one location, this is a great way to ship. Now, once you're to this point, it kicks in. I left my slides behind, didn't I? We want to talk about the biohazard label. So the biohazard label, it is a worker safety label from OSHA for bloodborne pathogens. It's not a shipping label. So it's not something that belongs on the outside of your package, but it does belong on the inside of the package. The best place for it to maximize the hazard communication is on your secondary container. If it's not already pre-printed, you can get biohazard stickers and put them on your label. Canisters like this have it pre-printed, it's embossed on the lid, or there's stickers on the canister. You want it on this element because this is where the communication begins for when things become dirty for the person who's receiving the package. Everything from this point inward is dirty. Everything from this point outward is clean. So at this stage, you are going to be working clean. You need to disinfect. Get my remote again. Whatever disinfectant you would use to clean a spill of these agents, use that to wipe down your secondary container. Use that to clean a space so you have a clean surface to work on, and change your PPE. You can wear no PPE, or you can put on clean PPE to handle the package from here on out. It must be on a clean surface. The reasoning behind that is because everything from here on out can be handled by somebody with bare hands outside of a laboratory, so it needs to be clean. We don't want a package to break open at a FedEx facility or in the courier's car, and it breaks open and they pick this up and they don't realize this is dirty, laboratory dirty. It should not be. It should be clean enough to just do this and you're fine, right? And then they see the biohazard symbol and know they don't need to go any further without some sort of protection. So we're going to put these in the secondary container, and you can have multiple secondary containers in a single box. That's fine. Make sure you add cushioning material like bubble wrap. You can use paper towels. You can use plastic wrap. Anything that cushions these so that they don't slide around inside. For a kit like this, the bubble wrap is perfect. You should have just enough to keep things seated in there. You add your refrigerant. This should be in the freezer at least 24 hours before you use it. And that's pretty much standard for any ice pack. Not refrigerated, but the freezer. put it in with your specimens, and you want to make sure nothing shifts no matter how you move it. See, this is still shifting, so I would need more packing material. And then you would close your styrofoam container. Now, this is not an outer box for shipping. It's not compliant for the drop test for category B or category A. You could ship an exempt specimen like this, but it's pretty discouraged to ship with styrofoam by itself. Often our styrofoam boxes left over in the lab get contaminated in some way, and when they're so porous, we can't get them clean. So I really discourage using these as something that somebody's going to handle outside the laboratory. So you take this, let's put it into our outer box. And then you will have some paperwork. If you're shipping to the State Lab of Hygiene, we have their requisition form. And Joshua's going to go over some of the information that goes on the forms and that sort of paperwork. Regardless of where you send it, the regulations say you have to put some sort of list of specimens inside the package. So it's outside that secondary container, but inside the package. So my recommendation is you just set it right on top before you close the box. If this is going to a lab that's not the State Lab of Hygiene, just get a short piece of paper and write, I have this many tubes of, cow's blood, 5 milliliters each, and you can just write that on, that's a list of specimens. Or you can use whatever requisition form is sent to you from your recipient that they want you to fill out. This will have a list of what you're ordering, and you can just put it right there. Does that make sense, having that list? And then you can close the box. I know the state lab prefers that you use one piece of tape across the top and down, and not a whole bunch of extra tape. It's easier to open at the end. You don't need to seal these completely closed. The box is not a leak-proof container. It's just a secure containment for just not spilling out. So if you do this, and it's only the styrofoam box moving, that's okay, right? If it's other stuff moving in there and you can feel your secondary container shifting, you need to open it up and put in more packing and stabilize it, okay? So nothing should ever rattle in there except that styrofoam's gonna move a little bit. For labeling, move forward a little. To label for a category B, since it is hazardous, you have to have the required elements of a proper shipping name, a UN number, and then there's going to be some sort of hazard diamond associated with it. For a category B, the UN number is an actual diamond label that you use instead of the infectious substance giant big diamond, okay? So for a category B, we need to have a UN 3373 diamond, and then we need the proper shipping name of biological substance category B. They don't have to be on the same label. So this is distinct in this diamond. It has to be in this format. It can be a bigger shape of a 4x4 square, or it can be small like this. It has to say UN 3373 inside and no other major writing on the inside. You can't fill this in with other information. And it has to be seated like a diamond on your package, all right? The proper shipping name part of this label is distinct on its own. It's just sharing the same sticker. This has to be written or labeled onto your package. You can handwrite it on the package, you can create a label, or you can purchase labels with that proper shipping name. The proper shipping name is like your name. The order of the words matter, the spelling of the words matter. So biological substance, comma, category B is what you have to put on that package. Nice and conveniently, these are all on one sticker, so you need to put them on the package and orient that diamond so it can be read as a diamond. That's the key part of that. So the words are sideways, but you don't want to square it up so you read the words, because then you don't have a diamond. So the diamond is a critical element of the hazard designation. So now that you have all of your hazard information on the package, now you want to put your contact information on the package. The state lab would like you to do all of that on a single side. The regulations say all of your labels have to go on two adjacent sides. So you could use the front and maybe the lid, or the front and a side for your labels, right? So I would put State Lab of Hygiene Specimen Receiving. Talking is hard. And then we have another address here that has a responsible person name and number, and then an address. So this would be your address, and then you're designated somebody in your lab to be the responsible person for the package. And that would go on there. Every package of a category B or a category A has to have a responsible person's name and phone number on the package, either the exterior or on the paperwork. I recommend both. Putting it on the package is the most direct way to have that on there. So I would say every time, put a responsible person's name and phone number on your packages. It can be anybody in that transport chain. It can be your laboratory, it can be your receiving laboratory. Whoever it is has to answer their phone no matter what time someone calls. They have to know about the shipment, be knowledgeable of how to be able to answer any questions that are given to them about the shipping, about the safety, about maybe a spill cleanup. But they also need to know that they are the responsible person too. You don't just spring that on somebody unless they're the designated person. But they should know that, hey, we have shipments in progress right now and you're the responsible person for this week. It's usually only a day or two because these don't go that, they're not in shipment for very long. So all of these labels can go on the same side. If there's not enough room, you can use the two sides, but they can only be split up in a certain way, again by the regulations. I can put my contact information on a different surface than my hazard information, but all the hazard information has to be on a single side, okay? Which gets a little complicated if you add dry ice to your package. So now I have to label for my category B, which I've already done, and I have to label for my dry ice, which is a lot more information. So we have a class 9 diamond, and on the same sticker, we have a UN number, UN 1845, on that side. We have a proper shipping name of dry ice. And then dry ice, you also have to have a quantity on the package. All of those elements are describing the hazard, so they have to be on the same side as your category B information. Any questions online? All right. Now we'll go over more hands-on packaging scenarios as we move forward. I just want to make sure that you walk through it at least once with us. An example of the box, dry ice with label and markings. One thing about dry ice within the US, by the DOT regulations, if you're going by ground only, dry ice is not regulated as a hazardous material. You can still ship it as we do to the state lab. Even though it's going by ground, we still declare it as a full hazard with all of the markings. Perfectly okay to do that. But that's because the state lab wants us to be declaring that, and the courier may want that as well. So it kind of depends on what the carrier wants and what your recipient prefers. If your carrier doesn't want you to declare the entire full hazards for your dry ice, the regulations have allowances for you to not do that. So I want you to be aware of that. All this information for dry ice shipping is actually available just by an easy search of the regulations to find the references. But for instance, if you have dry ice for medical purposes with other materials that are not hazardous, say transfusion products or something like that. So you have that on dry ice. They're exempt, they don't contain pathogens, they can ship without any special labeling. And then the dry ice, if it's going by ground, you only have to write on the package, dry ice for medical purposes. And that's all you would declare on that sort of package, even though there may be blood in there and dry ice. It's just because we don't regulate it on the roadway the same way as it's regulated by air. So it's more to understand that you have options when it comes to dry ice shipping, and it does get confusing. The reasoning for that is we use dry ice for a lot of food shipments, and they're not hazardous, but you still have quite a bit of dry ice. It doesn't get to be regulated until it's about 200 kilograms. So that's a lot of dry ice that you can ship. So you can get an ice cream cake at Culver's and get some dry ice from the grocery store and pack it in there and just take it home in your car. You don't need special training. You don't need special packaging or handling training. The downside of that is dry ice is a little bit dangerous, and you don't want to be in an enclosed car with a bunch of dry ice. Even if you do have ice cream cake, you're going to pass out before you can eat it, right? Which that's not fun for anybody. So you need to be cautious when you're traveling with dry ice. That's why we kind of do prefer that you do label and ship it as a full hazard. It's just really better information for the people handling it in the handling stream. Oop, see, I turned to the side again when I should be looking over here. It's a learning curve. So all the rules for the box exterior, we went over a few of them. All labels can be on a single side or two adjacent sides. All hazard labels must be on a single side of the box. They cannot overlap or obscure necessary parts of other labels. So there's just a lot of little rules. If I have this label here, and we're going to pretend that that fully fits on the box, or do I have another surface here with Velcro? I'll use this surface here. So that fully fits on the box. And say I need to get my category B in there, but I want to put it here. I can't. Okay, it might save space, but this is obscuring this diamond, and we can't do that with another label. Could I put it here in the white space outside the diamond? Yes, I can do that, because that's not part of this pristine label, right? I also can't obscure the wording of a proper shipping name or a UN number like this. That sort of overlap, you're obscuring the communication of the labels and markings on the package, right? If a package has directional arrows, such as these, a lot of them are pre-printed, you should not be obscuring them with another label. That actually becomes a shipping label once it's put on a box or pre-printed on a box. Let's see. So all diamonds must be oriented as diamonds. We can't square them up to make space. It's actually easy for me if I have it up over there. My eyesight's a little bit better, thank you. Labels must be pristine and intact the way they're intended to be. The white space is purposeful on these labels. If you find any that are shaped a little differently, so say you have this example of a class 9 label for dry ice, sometimes you'll find things where it says dry ice on the inside, or it has an area for a quantity on the inside of these labels, or this number is a lot bigger, or this is maybe different colors. Those are illegal labels, and you actually can find them and buy them, and you wouldn't realize that they're not acceptable until you try to use them. So be mindful of the examples that you have in front of you. They should match that in the design and format and coloring. The box itself must be in good condition. Now, if you receive a kit from a lab like the State Lab of Hygiene, they manage these, before they send them back to you, they do an inspection check to make sure everything's in good shape so they're not sending you shoddy materials. They want to send you a kit that's intact that you can keep using. So they will kind of filter those out, but you can keep an eye on it as well. If you've stored it a while and you realize that it got a little bit wet on this side and it's all squashed in, you can't use that for a category B anymore. You could use it probably for an exempt specimen shipment or just something else you're shipping that's not hazardous. So you don't always have to throw it away, but just be mindful of that. If they get contaminated or gunky, or if you're keeping it in the wet areas of your laboratory where you have aerosols, you can't use that for a shipment, because if it's contaminated, it's going to harm somebody in the transport chain. Let's see. If you don't have enough room, say you have a box like this is a category A shipper, and say I want to ship my specimens with a little bit of dry ice on this, but I have to get all of my hazard labels on the same side, and I can't. Your only option is to get a bigger box. You don't have the option to say, well, I can lap these over to the side and scooch them over and do all that. You can't. It shouldn't be accepted even for transport, and if it is, it will not make it to its destination. And if it did, I would be shocked. Things happen. If you receive anything like that, you should let the sender know what you've seen, because they may not realize that they're out of compliance with their labels or their boxes. Some do's and don'ts. Actually, I'm going to pause right here because we're going to go and hand things off to Joshua, because he's going to go over some specimen information, and we'll get to the do's and don'ts and scenarios after that.
Hi, everybody. I've got some objectives here, and they're going to reinforce what Tara talked about. So objectives here, we want to describe the different classifications of dangerous goods, summarize the requirements to classify dangerous goods in your areas, identify the key elements to have an order prior to packaging and shipping. There's several. And then discuss the packaging and shipping process again to reinforce what you learned earlier. Apply the principles to ensure total quality from packaging in your facility to receipt at the destination, in this case here at State Lab. And then describe some pitfalls, common mistakes that we see that affect quality of the results that we turn to you. And then we'll supply you with a bunch of resources that are available on our webpage. So putting this all in context, preparedness is important. So in your facility, you want to have policies and procedures in place with respect to biosafety of what you're shipping. And we encourage, in the clinical laboratories typically do risk assessments, but out in the field, you may or may not have those. But they're really good to have because it relates to what you're packaging and shipping. And we can help you with that, give you input on developing those. You want to gather your supplies and have those, in your PAR area or available readily for what you're shipping. Here at State Lab, we have a clinical orders department for communicable disease that can supply you with free supplies, collection kits and mailers. And so if we hop over to that, and we'll look at this again. This web page, there's contact information, the order form. This order form has every kit that we have, and you can complete this out. You don't necessarily need to know your submitter number. What we call a submitter number is your agency number, but it's good if you have that. We can get that to you. It's typically on your requisition forms. And you can return this by fax or email. You can also call us, and we'll typically, if we receive that order by, I would say 1:30 in the afternoon on a given day, we can turn that to you same day. We also have the kits below. So for example, if you wanted to send us HCV PCR, we could click on that, and this document talks you through what's included in the kit, a description, what it's used for, and then the packaging and shipping directions. And if you have any questions about this or any questions about what's on the website for clinical orders, give us a call. Our team members are happy to help you. All right, so we've got our supplies, we have our policies and procedures in place. Then you want to connect yourself with courier services, and there's several. And I would encourage you to have more than one available, because if there's problems at one, you'd want to have a backup plan. And if you're in a pinch, and give our customer service a call. They can help you out, direct you where to go. So the Postal Service is one that's used more for human exempt shipping. I would say that we see that primarily. UPS or FedEx. Keep in mind, if you're shipping category A, you can't use UPS. They don't do that. So you'll need to partner with FedEx. Purple Mountain Services, formerly the Gold Cross Courier, is our courier here at State Lab for anything that's coming to us per our request. You don't pay for that shipping. We cover that fee exempt. And you just give them a call, and they will schedule a pickup. If you call them before noon on any given day, it will be same day pickup. There's exceptions with holidays in there if it falls around a weekend or midweek. And Erin Bowles does a great job of communicating that with the courier service and also with our clinical lab partners when there's changes to the schedule. If you have any questions about that, just call our customer service department and they can tell you, give you more information on that. You might have a contracted courier, or you might have your own courier, and there's best practices around that, being prepared for spills and any kind of emergency that might happen with the transport. So we encourage you to look into that, and after the talk today, you can connect with Tara, Dr. Sterkel, or myself, and we can help you out with that. Any questions you have related to that? So reinforcing what Tara talked about earlier, what is an infectious substance? It's defined by the Department of Transportation. This is the regulation. It was finalized in 2006. it breaks them into 9 different categories, but for the sake of this talk, we're primarily focusing on the category B. And Tara talked a little bit about category A, so I'm going to re-emphasize that. So this is any capable of causing permanent disability or life-threatening or fatal disease in otherwise healthy humans or animals when exposure to it occurs. These are the markings that you have to use. UN 2814 is, we see a lot here at Wisconsin State Lab. These are clinical specimens coming our way. There's also a marking for if it's affecting animals, and the testing is related to that. And then category B, this is generally a substance not capable of causing permanent disability or life-threatening fatal disease in otherwise healthy humans or animals when exposure occurs. And there's only one marking for that, and that is UN 3373, biological substance of category B. So in your institution, who can classify? Classify infectious substances. It really relates to who's certified to do that. Like Tara said, it has to be somebody that's been trained by somebody who's certified to do that packaging and shipping. And these are the elements that are involved in that. You have to complete OSHA bloodborne pathogens training and have documentation or record of that. Your staff have to be trained on chemical, biological, and any other organizational or lab-wide specific safety training and have records of that. You have to complete the DOT hazardous materials training, commonly referred to as HazMat, and there needs to be a record of that training. And then once all those records are in place, you have to have somebody pull that all together and sign off that that person who has done the trainings is certified then to package and ship. I put IATA dangerous goods training on here as well. That isn't necessary for category B or for certification in general to ship category A, but we recommend that you have one person in your facility trained in that. You never know when you're going to be in a situation where you have a substance that you have to ship category A, and you want to be prepared for that. And then that certification typically has a requirement of renewing every 2 to 3 years. Yeah. Yep.
For the records and sign-off of completed trainings constitute certification, who does the sign-off?
The person who is pulling all of that together. It might be a supervisor in your facility, or it could be a technical director.
We got a couple questions online here as well.
Sure.
I just wanted to make sure that everyone could hear from these answers too. Does the styrofoam mailers come with a cardboard box to put it in? And I already responded online, if ordered from State Lab, yes, it does. And then another one we had here, and I might just jump over and share screen. On the WSLH order form, what is a mailer and what is a cardboard sleeve in the middle column of the order form? So I'm going to share what the form looks like, and we can talk about that real quick. So this is the WSLH order form, and I think we see here container media only, no mailers, bags, or absorbents. Is that what we're referring to online? You feel free to unmute yourself too. It's coming from an iPhone, which I know is not always easy to unmute and connect here. So a mailer is generally, that's going to be the kit, the container itself, the whole package together is often called the mailer. The bag is usually referred to as our biohazard inner bag, and the absorbents are those little squares that we've kind of shown through all of this. So generally you're coming through each one of these kit numbers has a specific list of contents. So if you open these, you can see what is in the contents there. If it comes with the styrofoam mailer, which does come with a cardboard box for ours, if it comes with your labels already, your instructions, your absorbent material, it'll tell you what's in there. Oh, it says underneath where we're looking, under mailer. Let's go back. Mailers and labels. Is this what we're talking about here? So mailer is still looking at, that's the whole kit as a whole. So that's looking at our whole category B box is considered our mailer. And the labels are like our UN 33 label, our dry ice labels, things like that. Does that answer the question?
So on the top part of the form, you're getting the whole kit. On the bottom, you can order parts of the kit.
A question was, so cardboard sleeve only is, we have a small white styrofoam mailer. Can they be shipped to state lab without an outside box? Or should the styrofoam mailer be placed in a box before mailed to state lab? So this is,
Okay, I actually asked our person that handles all of the mailing for these shippers, and he explained that we send out the smaller styrofoam boxes without the cardboard covering for specimens that don't need dry ice. If they just can come at room temperature and they don't need anything else, we will send out just the styrofoam mailers without the cardboard cover. So that's why the smaller ones don't have that extra cardboard piece, and it is fine to use Purple Mountain for transport for those. We have actually checked those smaller styrofoam mailers to make sure that they do pass the drop testing that is required for Category B shipments.
got a couple more questions here. Is there a price sheet that goes with the order form? All of our kits are available at no charge as long as you're sending us specimens. So this is part of our full testing price is the kit itself. So there is no cost to you to get a kit from us. And Brittany, I see you have a follow-up question regarding the styrofoam. You're welcome to unmute if you want to ask that.
Yeah, so we've always just been sending them in the styrofoam as well. I'll just turn my camera on. Through the post office, and then now after I see the box, I'm getting concerned on how our specimens have gotten there for a few years. Because they've only gone in this. I've never known to put them in a box on top of it. We're just sending like STI specimens to clarify that and pap tests.
Specifically related to that, I can say we would prefer it if you would change to the box, I think, but shipping through the post office, then I don't think the post office would accept that. But we do have problems with samples not being kept at the proper temperature through the USPS. So due to how many samples you're shipping, we'll talk about that a little bit later, and proportion to frozen cold packs that you might be in there, and then just the transport time as well. The environment is not within your control or our control where that package is during transport.
We had another question on here. We would only need cardboard box if we use dry ice. We really prefer if you use cardboard box for anything that's truly category B. Those smaller styrofoam shippers are just meant for room temp or exempt kinds of specimens. We've got a question here as well. The smaller styrofoam mailer, can you ship ice pack with that? And I think it's too small to fit an ice pack in. Is that right, Joshua?
It's too small.
Okay.
I would just say too, like the styrofoam, you don't necessarily need to, it doesn't need to be a cardboard box. It can be an overpack. An overpack, which sort of is like a larger...
Like a cushioned envelope?
Cushioned envelope that seals over the top. You put the styrofoam package that's sealed into that, and then you can seal that. And that's acceptable. And then you're avoiding the cardboard situation.
We got lots of questions here. I love it. Is Purple Mountain available outside of Madison metro area?
Statewide.
Statewide, that's right. Lafayette uses Purple Mountain. We are about 1.5 hours out of Madison. Yeah, so it is fully statewide. Wherever you're at, we can get a shipment to you.
And keep in mind too, with Purple Mountain, for fee exempt, you can send that to us through them, and we have an account with them for your submitting agency to ship. But you can also establish an account with them directly for anything that you want to ship to us that wouldn't qualify as fee exempt. And they're very amenable to talking about that. We can help you if you have questions please call our customer service line and we can set you up with that.
Next question, can you please clarify, do the styrofoam boxes Cat B need to be placed inside a cardboard box for shipping?
I would defer to the regulation, but like we talked about, an overpack could be something you'd use instead of a cardboard box.
And styrofoam can technically meet the needs of the Cat B drop test, which is from shoulder height. If you drop it on the corner, does it pop open? And just thinking through that those can get damaged more easily in shipping, but they do technically meet the standards for hard-sided container. Just be really thoughtful and make sure it's sturdy enough. A question, two people want to know what an overpack is. I'm going to see if I can Google it and put up an image.
Yeah, UPS and FedEx have overpacks. I don't know if we have one here.
An overpack is a container that goes around your shipment so that you can ship multiple packages in a single shipment. So if you wanted to do an overpack, say you had 2 Category B specimens or an exempt and a Category B to go to the same location, you don't want to ship them separately. You have to package them if they were to be shipped alone. So I package each of these as a Category B in this instance. Then I could get a larger box or some sort of larger container. So a box is often used, and it doesn't have to be of any standard or any durability, just a good box that can hold them without bottoming out, okay? And these would go in the box with some cushioning material so they don't shift. You close the box, and the exterior has to be labeled for every hazard inside. So I have 2 Category Bs, so I would need Category B labels on the outside of that box. If I had Category Bs with dry ice on the inside, on the outside of the overpack, I would have to have Category B labels and dry ice labels on the outside. And if you're doing an overpack, you have to have the word overpack on the outside and on any shipping paperwork that's necessary.
Were you able to find
You
one?
can use an envelope for an overpack if you have smaller packages, but not a lot of Category B packages are that small, but you could do it for an exempt specimen or something little like that.
Yeah, our STD samples tend to come more in like padded envelopes. They'll have the inner Category B bag and then the sample within that, but they meet the requirements to be in that softer container and not be too damaged. We got a couple additional questions here. If we only use Purple Mountain Courier Service to WSLH, we do not need the cardboard box or overpack over the styrofoam. Is that correct? And that is an interesting exemption. Our Purple Mountain Courier does have their own outer container that's hard-sided that we can put specimens in. So there are some exceptions there where you wouldn't need the outer container because our specific courier has the container they provide for you.
So essentially they're overpacking it.
They're overpacking it for you.
I think a lot of the questions about the styrofoam container are stems from something that I said. Generally speaking, a styrofoam container is often not durable enough to meet the standards for Category B shipments unless you have done the drop tests. They've done the drop tests, so if they're sending you a kit with a styrofoam outer box, it has been assured that it will meet the durability standards. So I misspoke on that because my trainings that I give at the university, I just say don't do it because nobody's going to be doing drop tests. It does take time. You have to document all of the tests and all of the trials that you do. But this has been done by the State Lab of Hygiene, so it is acceptable if it meets the durability standard. So I apologize for that.
We got a couple more questions here. I just want to add, that as you order these from clinical orders, they're very experienced people. Mike Hawk, Austin, who's here as well, they're trained in the specimen receiving and the clinical orders part. So if you say, I want to send a rabies sample, I want to send this, they're going to send you the packaging that's appropriate for what you want to ship. So that's going to be a really key part. We got another question here. When we order mailers, we do not get cardboard boxes. Would we need to order these separately? If so, where is this on the order form? And so you can put that, you can call, you can email, you can write into the order form what you're specifically testing for, and they're going to send you what's appropriate. But if you specifically want a cardboard outer box, you can write that on there and we can ship that to you. We have those available.
Keep in mind that if you're using one of our kits to send to us and for some reason Purple Mountain's not available and you're sending those styrofoam through FedEx, I don't think FedEx would pick that up. They would probably leave that. So you want to meet this requirement, or at least have some of these supplies in your facility for when you're using alternate modes of shipment.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
A lot of carriers will not take just a styrofoam box for a category B. That's not absolute, but many will not. So you can ask them if you're unsure.
Yeah.
We got another question here. What do the gray boxes mean on the order form? Example, looking through the rabies shipper kits. So I'm going to share my screen here again so we can look at the order form, what we're talking about. The grayed out boxes. There we go. I think that means that they're not available for that.
Right, they're not available in bulk. You can't order a bunch, and they're also, we don't ship in parts. So it's a complete kit.
Okay, I think that's it for our online questions for now. We're going to move forward with our next section. Thanks, everyone. We'll have more time for questions later.
All right, so we've covered being prepared, setting up courier services. We've talked about what certification is and the minimum amounts that you need to have in place for everybody that's packaging and shipping. Again, certification really falls to category A shipping, but these are things that are good to have in place for anybody who's packaging and shipping hazardous materials in your facilities. So key elements to keep in mind. What are you shipping? Are you shipping a specimen? Are you shipping a propagated isolate of an organism, a virus? Typically those are coming on plates. So here's an example of some of the different collection devices that you might encounter when you're collecting specimens. It might be a swab. It might be a transport medium like universal transport medium for example, COVID testing or viral testing. You might have tissue or fluid that, for example, the sage cup here, sputum is commonly submitted in there, or raw stool. There's the assortment of what we call enteric transport medium or Carrie Blair, and there's different chemicals and preservatives in each of those. And you want to be familiar with what those are, and that's partly why you need to be trained in the chemical safety because you're going to be interacting with those if there's spills. The conical vials, there's 15 and 50, and they come in different sizes and colors, and those typically are, again, body fluids of some type or tissue that you'd use that for. And then out in the field, you might not have propagated isolates, but in clinical laboratories that can't rule out certain organisms or need to use us for testing, might send us an agar plate of an organism, a slant, or a broth. And you want to be prepared to ship those. So identify what you're shipping and then gather your materials. It's really key to be looking at the destination lab that you're sending to and understanding what their instructions are and what their requirements are for the transport of the sample. If you're shipping category A, then you're also required to fill out a shipper's declaration form, and there's software available through FedEx to help you with that, or if you're using Safety Pack, they have a application that helps produce that. There's requirements for that form, and so you want to follow those to a T. So from the handouts that we have available, there's a transporting infectious substances safely from DOT packet, and this image comes directly from that. And I think it summarizes really well, and Tara's slide did an excellent job of this as well. But is it category A or is it category B? And this really helps you go through that and determine what you're dealing with and how it needs to be packaged. Again, category B, you don't need somebody certified. Category A, you do. In order to say this is a category A substance and needs to be packaged that way. So some We talk about the time between the order of a test until it reaches the lab as called the pre-analytical phase of testing. This is the most critical and vulnerable phase of testing. There are things that are out of your control and out of our control. Where we can partner is, as while the sample is in your institution, you can control the quality of the specimen or the isolate that you're sending. And once it is received here at Wisconsin State Lab, we can control the rest. The vulnerable points are between pickup and delivery. And so you want to keep this in mind when you're packaging and shipping your specimens to us. Online test reference manuals, there's many for all the different labs. They're great resources for information. Familiarize yourself with that. We're going to hop over to ours in a minute here. Package inserts. Review the package inserts for the swabs and the kits that you're using to collect specimens. There's typically those in there, and they go through what to do. One common thing that we see is the viral transport medium has a septum and it needs to be broken. And if you're forcing the swab and forcing the cap to be tightened, it can come loose and leak out in transport. So follow the instructions on those. Familiarize yourself with those documents. Know the temperature that you need to maintain during shipment. And then understand the workflows of the destination. I would say network and call. Our customer service department is happy to talk with you about our workflows and how things are turned here, and give you recommendations for how to effectively package and ship samples to us so that we can turn results to you very timely. I'm going to talk a little bit here, and then we'll hop over to the website to take a look at an online test reference manual. But specimen container labeling and what the two identifier rule is. Really, we need to be able to match the sample that you're sending to us to the requisition form that you're sending to us. They need to be traceable. And so the kind of like we're talking about with the diamonds and the regulated namings, it's the same standard applies. The names have to match, the dates of birth have to match, or another unique identifier needs to match both so we can put them together. So if you, we just redesigned our online test reference manual. It's available from the home page or by searching up in the search for. But on here, this is a good example, and we'll just talk through an example here for if we wanted to look at chlamydia. Put in partial words and there's tags. But if we wanted to send, for example, chlamydia, gonorrhea, TMA, this is a common one that comes. Here you can see the test code that you need to order. There's information about how often we turn these results once received. How often the results are available. We do this testing here Monday through Friday. The recommended uses for this test. Contraindications for the test. And then we get into specimen and transport. So you want to take a look at this, study it before you're packaging and shipping. So here's the specimen requirements for your genital swabs, if they're oral and rectal swabs, the temperatures that they can be transported at or they need to be maintained at. If it's urine, the kit to use, how to transport it. You can hop to the kits via hyperlink here, right to clinical orders. and the requisition form to use when ordering this. And then there's like interpretation of results, the test method that we're using, and then the billing and the coding for this. All available on our website. If you have questions with any of this, you can always give us a call, but this is a great resource for you. So laboratory test requisitioning, and this is one example. This is probably our most used form that we have here at State Lab. But we'll go through this. Most orders in a healthcare system are coming in electronically, so computerized physician order entry, CPOE. We have a little bit of this with some of our submitting clinical laboratories that are connected to us electronically. So orders are coming in that way. And typically with that, you can drive collecting all of the required elements through that. When you're using paper, of course, it's more vulnerable to misses in the process. So if you're using the paper form, most importantly here is to be complete. Check it for completeness and correctness before you're sending it. And be mindful of penmanship on the form and on the sample tube that you're sending our way. Here at CDD, we have a requirement of these are the elements that must be on the form in order for us to move forward. If anything is missing, it will cause a delay or it might render us unable to test for you. So you want to keep this in mind. We need to know where it's coming from. If the outer packaging of the mailer isn't labeled with your sending agency, we can't determine where it came from, and if it's missing from the requisition form, we can't determine where it's coming from, and then we might not be able to test it, and we'll discover it later when you're looking for the results and calling and we're not finding anything and that. So be sure, if you're using this form, that the information that's in this upper square matches your agency. And you can call our clinical orders department and they can hook you up with any number of forms with your information on there. The nice thing about these forms is some of them are 2-ply, I think some are 3, and you have copies, so you can keep a copy in your lab or in your institution. The full name of the patient, at least first and last. We don't require middle initial, but that's helpful. The date of birth, the collection date. Time is also helpful but not required, but at a minimum, the collection date. The more information you can supply on this form, I'll just encourage you, the better. It helps us out. Specimen type and source. So, a swab, where's it from? Right axilla or any number of other sites. Is it a lesion? That's sometimes a question that comes up, and it's helpful for us to know that. The clinical information is helpful as well, but again, that's not required. The last element that's required is what tests you want us to perform. So if any of these elements are missing in your order to us, we create it as a problem and it causes a delay. Our customer service will follow up with you. We don't send it up to the laboratory immediately. There's some exceptions there, but primarily it's going to cause a delay of us getting results turned to you, potentially. And then resources here for any questions that you have, the online test reference manual, which we have links to in the slides, and the slides will be out on the website for you to grab. Calling our customer service department. Our lab also has technical specialists in each of the respective sections of the lab. And then we have excellent directors that are available for questions as well. So please reach out to us. This slide kind of summarizes what Tara talked about and distills it into a table format of Category A, what's required, category B, what's required. And just to highlight here, it's really the packaging. Category A, rigid outer packaging. Category B, rigid outer packaging. The secondary, proof of absorbent material. And an itemized list of contents. Dry ice if available. And from that Department of Transportation document, this is just an image of an example, a very academic example of what triple packaging means. Again, it's just one example. You just want to defer to the regulation for guidance. Yes. Oh, okay. So let's quickly, sorry, this is running a little, I'm running a little over time here. I want to talk about some things that we commonly see here at Wisconsin State Lab that are issues. So on the samples, lacking 2 identifiers. The specimens don't match the requisition form. Multiple specimens packed in a single biohazard bag. If you can imagine, if you have one sample leak out, it's going to render all of the rest of the specimens contaminated potentially, and for biosafety, we might not be able to test the rest of those, including the one that leaked out. So we prefer if you package each sample individually. Kind of like a more of a workflow thing to be talking about with your labs, like absorbent wrapped around the specimen. That's part of the requirement. But we typically don't open the biohazard bags or the 95 kPa bags, depending on what the specimen is. But we like to do a check of the patient information to match to requisition when we're receiving those in. So keeping that in mind, caps loose or misthreaded is a common one that we see. Again, another workflow. Requisitions or specimens out of a logical order slows us down when we're receiving specimens here. So if you have a lot of specimens that you're sending our way, keep them in order and keep the requisitions in order in some logical way. Sometimes we don't have a requisition form. Sometimes we have a requisition form and we don't have a specimen in the box. So just be sure you're checking what you're packaging. Deficient category B packaging or not following the regulation. Really defer to that documentation and give us a call if you have any questions about how to package and ship. Kind of looping back to the temperature requirements. If you need to maintain frozen temperature during shipment, then you're going to use dry ice. If you need to maintain refrigerated temperature during transport, then you want to use frozen cold packs. The cold packs really should be froze for 24 hours before they're being used. If you need to maintain ambient temperature during transport, in summertime here in Wisconsin, it's hot. So if you look at those guidelines, if it says, ambient preferred, but you can also ship refrigerated, probably during the summer months, you want to use some cold packs to keep it in temperature range. Overfilled packages, proportion of frozen cold packs to specimens that you're sending. Don't shove a lot of specimens into the box. Be sure that you're using adequate cold packs. Briefly here, rabies. Number one issue with rabies is that we're missing submitter information if you're pulling this from the website. So for any veterinary offices that are on the call today, or are watching this presentation on our website afterwards, please be sure that in this upper box that you have the name of your institution, the address, and a telephone number that we can reach you at. Rabies follows category B, shipping. Just to talk about what fee exempt means, again, to just reiterate, it really means that if we're requesting this sample here at State Lab, we provide that fee exempt shipping to you. For anything else, you would be partnering with a commercial carrier of some type. And this is a list of our common issues with rabies. I would just say, number one thing that we typically have here, this is a rabies mailer. We might be a bat, but it might be a head of an animal or a rodent that's in there. And then we ask that you, we'll just pretend that this is the paperwork. You don't put the paperwork in the box with the head or the animal, but you lay it on the top. If you're doing that, we would prefer that you put it under the first set of flaps and not under the second set of flaps, because if we're using a knife to open the box, sometimes the requisition forms can get cut in half. So just be thinking about all of that. As far as packages go, our clinical orders department monitors those and changes out parts or all of those for you. They're available free, so you can call and request those anytime. I don't know if I have another slide. Resources, yes.
Regarding the rabies packaging, do you have larger packages depending on the size of the head we're sending in?
We do. This is probably our largest one.
Okay.
We've got smaller ones as well.
Okay.
And I think there's one bigger, there might be one bigger one yet from this.
Okay, thank you.
And we were having a talk about this earlier. Probably best practice would be to double bag the head inside to maintain that leak-proof requirement during transport.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And if you need any extra supplies, clinical orders can set you up with that. Other questions? All right, I'm going to turn it over to Tara.
Look how smooth we are with these transitions.
As we're transitioning here, I just want to emphasize that while a lot of places will charge for the shipping materials and the courier and the training, we really try very hard to provide these at no cost to you because we want to be able to test your samples. We want to keep our staff safe so that we're not getting exposed to infectious materials as samples are coming in. We want to make this as easy for you as possible. We got one more question here. Should we tape one strip of tape around top of specimen container? So that's can help. I think, Terry, you mentioned earlier that if it's a poppable cap and not a screw cap tube, you might want to secure it. Screw caps should be sufficient on their own. And if you're over taping these, that really slows us down in our specimen receiving group. So prefer not to have excessive taping on each individual sample if you have a nice screw cap tube, which normally that's what we're sending to you in our kits as those good screw cap tubes.
Screw caps and snap caps usually will stay closed underground and air transport, so you shouldn't have to worry too much about that. All right. So Joshua touched on some packaging issues that they often see at the State Lab of Hygiene. I want to go over just some do's and don'ts. This is interactive, so I encourage anybody to throw anything in the chat. If you see anything, go ahead and speak up, and you guys can go ahead and chime in. I'd like to know, what do you think is wrong with this box? Why should this not be submitted for shipment? Go ahead.
I see that the diamond information has a tear over it.
Yes. The diamond is not intact. That's a pretty big non-compliance. Yes.
It's also not in like a diamond shape.
Yes. So if you look at how you're going to read the box with an address this direction, then you read the proper shipping name this direction. That seems like it's okay, but that diamond needs to be oriented as a diamond on the box. So it should be oriented as a diamond to the text on the box. Anything else on this box that maybe shouldn't be there?
Got a comment it says rabies on the outside. Should that be there?
Absolutely no. You should not be writing rabies diagnostic specimen on a box that you're shipping. There's biosecurity issues with that. That's why we don't put specific agent names on the outside. It is not a proper shipping name. We don't write patient specimens on the outside of boxes anymore, except for in some clinical situations. Additionally, it says exempt animal specimen. Exempt animal specimen is a shipping name for a non-infectious animal specimen. That's in the IATA international regulations. So you've labeled this as an infectious substance, biological substance category A, and an exempt specimen. Which is it?
Are you infectious or not? You can't be both. You can pack them both together, but when you pack them together, you have to declare the highest hazard. The highest hazard is category B. It doesn't matter that there's exempt specimens in there. We want to alert the handlers to a category B. Okay?
Another comment, incorrect placement of contents, maybe directionality of contents.
That could be, because this looks like a folded piece of paper. I'm not sure if this was just a piece of paper to cover an old label, but it does kind of look like a contents list.
Or
So
that
you
the
wouldn't want
labels-
that taped to the outside.
Are all facing different directions, depending how you read it.
Yeah, wouldn't that, you kind of just have to spin to read it, you know? All right, so now we have all these. These are all on there.
I had another comment, no return address. We just blocked that out to protect the privacy of the person who sent this to us.
I wasn't trying to shame anybody who might be on the call. All right, so now we have another one. State Lab of Hygiene supplied me with these for my campus training, so I wanted to make sure I shared back with them. Again, this one has a sender address to it. I'm just covering it up. What is wrong with this package? You guys are welcome to chime in anytime. You don't have to raise your hand.
Again, with the diamond, it is inappropriately placed. It is not diamond shaped, but it is square.
Yes. It's also, if you look at the label, see how it's got a crease in it? And it's not stuck on a solid surface. There's a divot in the styrofoam. That's another reason styrofoam isn't great for category Bs. Things don't stick to it all that well. They'll fall off unless you tape around the whole thing. So this is a really terrible placement. It's going to fall off. It's crinkled. That's not compliant.
So
Again, you're exempt, or are you a category B?
that was the next comment. Someone got that too. Good job, Abby.
There's something else missing from this, though. Oh, wrong. What else is missing from this package? You have a to address and a from address. There's no responsible person's name and phone number on the outside of that package. For the State Lab of Hygiene, you need to have that on the outside of the package. For all other category Bs, it can be on the package or on the paperwork. I think you should do both. Best practice, put it on both. You can't go wrong. If you do that with anything that you ship, even exempt specimens, you will not forget to do it when it counts. And you want that number there. If something does go wrong, you want them to have a number they can access quickly. All right, so we have some options available to use as a primary container. So this would be your specimen container that should be leak-proof in your package. And this is, again, another ground shipment. It's a conical tube. A tube such as this one here. Is this an adequate primary container? It has a screw cap. We're going to say yes. Screw cap shouldn't be knocking open during transport, and it should be leak-proof. What about a syringe with a capped needle that's been taped on so it doesn't fall off? Is that an appropriate primary container? What about a syringe with the needle taken off? Is that an appropriate primary container? It's really not unless you put it inside something else. I think a lot of diagnostic labs would ask you not to leave things in a syringe if you send it. I'm just guessing, but I'm pretty sure.
We got a question. Can you show an example of what a correct address to state lab looks like, using the name and number of person in address? So if you want to go back one slide, I think that is a correct address to us. The responsible person and phone number is usually the shipper, the person who packaged and is sending it to us, and not usually a person at the state lab who's taking responsibility for it.
Now, as far as the regulations go, they don't care who the responsible person is. They just have to know it's in transit and will answer their phone if somebody calls them. So it can be a whole separate line and a person not affiliated with either one, but a person willing to answer to it. Usually it's your to or from person. Usually it is your shipper who's talking about it or who is answering their phone. Okay, so conical tube syringe. What about a twist closed sample bag, like a Whirlpack bag? Just you fold it over and you have the little wire things. Is that a leak-proof primary container? No, it's not. Those leak crazy. You can put it inside something else, though, and then you have something leak-proof. A screw cap vial, like maybe these little guys, if they had a screw cap. Yes, because that's like what we're using for the state lab, and nice screw cap test tubes or a vial. A snap cap microtube, we just said earlier, that's a leak-proof primary container, but you have to make sure you're not just rattling a bunch of them around in a baggie. You can't do that. Don't throw them in a handful in a baggie. They're not peanuts for snacking, okay? Agar plates, if you tape them closed. So you streak something on agar, on a plate, and you've taped it closed. Is that a leak-proof primary container? It's really not. Actually, they crush pretty easily in transport. You want to put that inside something else and make that leak-proof and give it plenty of padding if you're going to send a plate. Household baggies with that slide zipper. Who's ever done the test with the spaghetti sauce in it and turned it upside down? Don't do that. They leak really bad. Household zip bags, period, leak a lot. You can use them for ground transport. State Lab doesn't want you using them for their transport, but you can use it if you go into other places. I advise putting 2 or 3 bags to use as a primary container because 1 bag will likely leak. 3 bags, you're unlikely to have a major leak.
We got a question. Sometimes when we receive a kit from WSLH, the UN3373 sticker is already on the styrofoam package and not positioned as a diamond. Should we take it off and reapply the sticker? And as you're talking about this, Tara, can you also talk about when you get packages that come with other labels on them and how to change that?
Yes. If you're able to remove it from a styrofoam container entirely, you can do that. It probably won't destroy the styrofoam. You should put a new label on that's oriented properly. It's unlikely to be flagged, but it can be flagged. And you don't want it flagged partway through your shipment when you don't have any chance to fix it, okay? If you have a cardboard box, do not peel labels off of them. You will destroy the integrity of the box. It just peels off that outer layer. You can no longer use that as a Category B box. And depending on how much you tore off it, you might not be able to use that for biological specimens safely, really, because you can really create holes. What's better to do is you might have these old labels on there. Let's say you don't want this address label on your box. What you can do is take white paper or white labels. Maybe you have those old, remember the dot matrix labels that you used to have in drawers all the time? Take a bunch of those, stick them over that so it's obscured completely. And then put a new label over it to cover it completely. You can't just put the label over the old label because you can see through them. And a lot of carriers will not take that. They'll flat out refuse it. So you want to completely obliterate it. Don't scratch it out, do anything like that. Completely cover it up, put the new label on, and orient it correctly. Okay, you have a nitrile glove with a specimen in it. It's been inverted and put into a little slide lock bag. Is that a primary container? No. Gloves are never a primary container. It does, I know with veterinary stuff that does happen sometimes, but you should put inside something with the screw cap or a good zip bag. All right, the EDTA purple top tubes with that rubber stopper. Should you do anything to secure that lid? A little extra? You can tape it, you can parafilm it, or pad it really well if they don't want you taping and parafilming. For ground transport, that's perfectly fine. For air transport, you do need to secure them closed or put it in a screw top tube. Resources for packaging materials. If your recipient lab doesn't give you kits like the state lab does, then you'll need to order your own Category B packages, or you can validate your own by looking up the regulations and doing the drop test with your own components. It may be worth your time to do it if you do a lot of shipping. It might save you money. Otherwise, just buy a Category B kit. They're not that expensive. Well, I can say that because I'm not the one buying them, right? Category A kits are very expensive. Category Bs are not by comparison. Fisher Scientific, VWR, and Safety Pack all have good products with decent enough prices and a lot of variety. Best variety is probably Safety Pack. If you need an odd-sized package, they have the odd-sized packaging stuff that you can order. Fisher has a lot of variety too. You often order in bulk for some of these. So if you're ordering bags, labels, they're often not in like quantities of 5, it's usually 50 or 500 labels, something like that. So be aware that you're not going to get small quantities. Many pre-made kits come with labels though. So that can make your life easier for a single shipment. It can be much simpler. Label Master, Uline are good sources for labels and some packing materials, but they're good for labels and for some trainings too. Some of these also do trainings. Safety Pack has shipping training and so does Label Master. So some of those can be helpful to you. They might not have the variety you need, but you can look into it. For just general information on Category B packaging, you don't need a formal training. In fact, the training isn't what certifies you, your employer certifies you. It's your employer's responsibility to see that you get the proper training. and that you have a training record for it. So your record of training really is just sort of your registration for this. But you don't need an official record of training for a Category B. You can look all of this information up yourself and make your own determinations. A lot of it's online. In fact, all of it's online. The transport regulations, all of those regulations are online and freely available with simple Google searches. It's not easy, though, to navigate the regulations. There's a lot of crossing back and forth. It can be complicated. Shippers like FedEx and UPS have really great dangerous goods, hazardous materials websites that you can go to, and they have contact information, and you can speak to somebody who's trained and get some advice on how to ship. Do I need to declare? They won't make a determination for you, but they can kind of point you toward what services and packagings may be available for you and processes. The same with the Postal Service. They don't have, I don't think, as good of customer service necessarily in person, but they have a really good web page for how to send things the way that they want to see it. All of those are within the regulations for Category B, but they do have some differences for how they prefer to see things. So it's important to know what your carrier wants you to do. They're allowed to ask you to go above and beyond the regulations if they choose, because it's a fee for service. They can pick it up or not. Do I have anybody who wants preservatives? Go ahead. 5-minute warning? Shoot. All right, preservative solutions. If you ship with formaldehyde or alcohol solutions with specimens, there are special rules for packaging. They are in the regulations in the DOT regs that you got in your pre-course handouts. You got them by email. So you can take a look at those and what those entail. Just be aware that you need to have heat sealers. There's some slightly different packaging involved. All right, just a little, let's go over some poor packaging, poor labeling. I want to do a different one here. So if you have this setup, you have 2 conical tubes. Inside them are 3 test tubes that have been cushioned with absorbent material, and those conical tubes are inside a zip bag. Is this setup acceptable for secondary containment? Is it leak-proof? It's fine for secondary containment. It is not fine for full shipment. Secondary containment just says you have to have, the primary layer is leak-proof, right? And the secondary container is leak-proof. You have possibly 3 leak-proof layers around these. These are just bundled inside a leak-proof container. Bundling is helpful because you have fewer things to fall out if this should break open. So that's really helpful to do. So this is okay for secondary containment. Does that make sense? You can also bundle in large zip bags. So if you have a bunch of secondary containers, you can put them into a large zip bag, put in some cushioning, zip it together, and you can put that inside the box. It's not a leak-proof layer, but it bundles it so that your specimens don't all fall out in 20 packs, and you have to clean it up. You just have 1.
Really great for organization and definitely helps our staff. So if you can bundle like samples in larger Ziploc bags, we really love that.
Yeah. And it gives a little added security. You know, sometimes we have a gut feeling that we want to have more containment and maybe bump something to a Category A, and it's not necessary to do, but we want more containment. Bundle it inside a nice zip bag. That's 1 more layer of containment. It's kind of an unofficial layer. We have some packages here. Here on the left, what is wrong with this package? Anybody? What I can see right away is this is not set properly on the label. If you can see right here, there's a label sticking out the bottom. You didn't fully obscure an old label. On here, it says Staph aureus on agar. You would never put that on outside of a package, no specific agent names. What about the proper shipping name? Is that an acceptable way to write biological substance Category B? It's not. You can't nickname it, you have to fully spell it out. The only option is what's capitalized.
We have a comment, no dry ice weight or label.
Correct, no dry ice weight or label or anything. It just says, and it says keep refrigerated contains dry ice. There's a whole lot of wrong with that, right? These are crazy things. These are probably old labels left on there that they didn't cover up. Or there's dry ice in there and they're really messing up. We also have the wrong UN number. This doesn't belong on this package at all. This is for an infectious substance affecting animals. And you don't need a UN number up here because for a Category B, it's right there, right? What about This one, what is wrong with this package? Right off the bat, I say UN 2900, that does match an infectious substance. It's the category A, but my proper shipping name, biological substance category B pathogen. Not only is that the wrong shipping name, it doesn't belong with this UN number, certainly doesn't belong with this label. We don't know what's in this. Is this a category A or is it a B? If this spilled on the roadway while you're transporting it, because of this label, they would treat it like a category A and you'd have a full HazMat response. And you might only be shipping a very low level diagnostic specimen that you'd call a category B. So that's something that would most assuredly get you fined. And anybody who decided to take this for transport. If they accept this for transport, they could also get fined. Let's see what else is on there. Last one, we'll go to this one. I didn't talk about this, but what do you think is wrong with this package? Why would this probably get rejected by the carrier?
It's not in a properly contained box for shipping.
It isn't in a box for shipping. Category B, I didn't mention this earlier, you can use plastic containers for the outside. That is acceptable, but typically you don't want something this small. So if it's the size of one of these, it's probably not big enough. So it wouldn't be compliant. What else would be wrong with this?
The infectious substance.
Right, the infectious substance label. There's no UN number, there's no proper shipping name on here, and we've got a partial label over here. So what is this? Again, we don't know what we're dealing with. If this is an infectious substance category A, this is a completely inadequate package. Additionally, what we didn't go over was how legible this has to be. If you are handwriting, you have to be writing in half-inch lettering in a legible manner. And it has to be able to read reasonably and organized on the package, which would make sense, right? You're not gonna be writing in cursive or using some funky script, Joker Sans or something to make your labels. It may be fun, but they can't read it easily. This should absolutely be rejected from the start. The carrier shouldn't even take it. And frankly, this one just looks like it has some sort of evil doers behind it. A handmade UN 3373 label. There's no weight for the dry ice. There's no room for dry ice in that. It's just wrong. This looks like a paper bag that's been taped together around something, which is never acceptable for a biological. For an exempt specimen, could you do this legally? Yes. Should you? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's not safe. It's not best practice. The people on the other end are going to get a mess. And hopefully you'll hear about it if you do send it that way.
And please don't list the WSLH director as the responsible person. I will get a very angry phone call.
Thank you for pointing that out. That was on purpose. I thought, how horrible would that be for the director right there?
I think we're at time for this part if we want to move into our scenario and hands-on training.
Okay. All right, now I didn't have the chance to make the changes that you wanted for the scenario, but we're gonna start at the end and work our way backwards. So if everybody, once again, can unpack your packages so that you have specimen containers out here. We're gonna pack the insides one time and then the rest will be labeling. So while we're unpacking, just wanna present this question to you. So you are sending samples to the state lab using their category B kit, but you don't have any more of these bricks. You had used too many on your last shipment and you need more. What can you use as a substitute for their particular pack with their kit? What's an acceptable refrigerant? Go ahead.
Reusable plastic ice packs that are frozen?
Reusable plastic ice packs that are frozen. So you need something that's meant to be an ice pack in a package. You need something that's been frozen for at least 24 hours because that's how long it takes to freeze those. And most ice packs, it does take quite a while. You do not want these other things. And we write these up here because we've seen them. Ice cubes in a zipper bag are not non-compliant, but they tend to leak. Zip bags leak. Unless you have a way of these not leaking, don't ever put them in a package with biologicals. Send to anyone. Find a way to make it not leak, then you can use them. Packs of frozen peas. Don't send that to the State Lab of Hygiene. Could you send that to someplace else? Technically, you could use that as a refrigerant, but that's going to be messy. It's going to be wet by the time it gets there and gross. So I wouldn't use that as a best practice. Is it a non-compliance? Probably not, but it's not a good thing to do. A freezer pack from a first aid kit. So you have one of those in the first aid kit and you think, if I just pop it and shake it up, it's nice and cold, I'm going to put it in the package. That will not stay cold long enough. It's not meant for that purpose. It's not an adequate refrigerant for your specimens. Plastic ice packs that have been refrigerated will not stay cold long enough. They're not going to retain their temperature, and you need frozen ice packs to keep your materials refrigerated. If you need them frozen, you need to be using dry ice. So now we're going to work through this scenario and we're going to package our materials. You have 25 vials. Now I know you don't really have 25 vials, but we're going to use our imaginations, right? 1 milliliter each of human blood. These are from 25 patients that were exposed at a family party to individuals that are now showing diarrhea, fever, and abdominal pain. They suspect Shigella, but they haven't done any testing yet. And you don't know which of these specimens are the ones who had symptoms. How would you classify this? Where's the first place you should look to decide, well, number one, is this an infectious substance? A strong possibility that it's there. So this is a reasonable expectation. Number two, we have to figure out, is it a category A or a category B? So we look on that category A list, first of all. And what do we see for Shigella? Cultures only. We don't have a culture. We don't have a confirmed positive. So what decision do you think would be best to make for this one? Category B. Perfectly acceptable way to go. So why don't you package your shipment as a category B? We also need to think about, ignore this, you have to keep your specimen frozen. Your specimen's frozen. So what would you do with your shipment? Pack it on dry ice. So package the box and then label it for category B in dry ice. And you can work together. When we ship, we use resources, so it's okay to ask other people. It's actually a really good question. Go ahead and carry on. I just want to mention that when you do package with dry ice, you have to leave enough space so that you have enough room for your secondary containers. Your secondary container has to be compatible with the dry ice, so it can't be brittle once it's frozen. But you can't use the dry ice as the stabilizer inside the package. It's not packing peanuts. So you can't just put dry ice in and that's good to go, because as it dissipates, it's no longer stable. So this has to be stabilized as best you can and padded, and there's dry ice. So, and we can't really simulate that here, but that's kind of what you have to work through when you use it.
If you have additional questions after this training, please feel free to reach out to us. Our customer service line is really a great resource for all of that. But all of these will be on our website. This is also our second of many trainings that we're going to be doing. So if you are not able to do the hands-on part right now and you want to get some practice with that, you're welcome to join us for one of our other in-person trainings, which are going to be all around the state in the next couple of months. So lots of opportunities for you to come. Absolutely recommend to your friends if you think others would find this training helpful.
So just remember your rules of all on a single side have to be all your hazard labels. You can have addresses on the adjacent side if they don't all fit on the same side of the box. So I had enough room on the box to fit them all on the same side. I have my from address and my responsible person name and number, and the two address, from address, responsible name and number. I have UN 3373, biological substance category B, oriented as a diamond. I have my class 9 label for dry ice, UN 1845, says dry ice here for a proper shipping name, and I would enter in the quantity of the dry ice in the package here. All that fits on the same side, so I have plenty of room. Alternately, if I didn't have enough room, I could leave those here and put my contact information on an adjacent side. And that's acceptable. State Lab prefers on the same side, but even they will acknowledge if there's not room, you just have to go with what you're allowed to do. All right. Let's go to a different scenario that I don't have on here. Give me, you're sending some specimens for STI testing here to the State Lab. There's some suspected agents in there, but you don't know for sure. You have 2 vials. What would you classify them as?
Say this is a routine wellness screening for a woman under 25.
Here we go.
We got a commenter saying Cat B.
Cat B. Otherwise healthy adult, no reason to believe that there are pathogens present in a routine screening. It's actually wouldn't be a regulated specimen, but you want to ship to the state lab as a category B. Other places, if they will accept it as an exempt specimen or unregulated, you can ship it as that. You would package it the same way. So for an unregulated specimen, without any dry ice, this is all you have to do. Oop, wrong way. To and from address, put a responsible person's name and number on there because that's a best practice. If it's unregulated, you don't have to use any diamond labels, no UN numbers. If you want to use exempt specimen, you can write exempt human specimen as your shipping name, and that's it. That's the only addition. State Lab would like you to send it as a category B, so go ahead and label your box again as a category B, but no dry ice this time.
Let's say they have a foamy, fishy discharge and have recently had a sex partner who's been positive for trichomonas.
Okay, so we change it up. Okay, so there's a strong suspect for trichomonas. The first place you look is on your category A list. And I don't know that one off the top of my head, I have to admit.
So we got a question here. What sizes of boxes do you recommend to order for shipping? And I would say that really depends on what you're shipping. If you're sending a single sample that needs to be room temp, you don't need a whole lot. If you're sending 100 COVID specimens and they need to be kept on dry ice, you're going to need a much bigger box.
Yes.
And we can certainly help with that decision too. If you can describe that to our clinical orders group, they can make sure that they give you something big enough to fit what you want to send.
Yes. It just really has to fit the packing materials and the specimens that you intend to ship.
We got another one for capillary lead samples. Would they also be unregulated or should they be sent category B?
So I'm assuming, I'm not familiar with the capillary lead sample. I'm assuming you're looking for lead in the specimen?
So that'll probably be.
So are they like a human blood or human sera?
It's a human.
Okay.
It would be.
Human sera without a known or reasonably suspected pathogen, biological pathogen, is an exempt or unregulated specimen. Lead is not a pathogen by the transport regulations. Is it bad for you? Yes, but that doesn't make it a pathogen. So that is not regulated as an infectious substance. In fact, I don't think it's regulated at all because it's just a diagnostic specimen with no known or expected pathogens. So it is just an exempt or unregulated specimen. The lead doesn't pose a hazard in transport. Now for the trichomonas, is that on the category A list? All right, so then how would you ship it if it's not on the list? I would ship it as a category B. You can also look at that category A definition. Does it cause life-threatening, permanent disability, or fatal disease in an otherwise healthy individual? It's treatable in healthy individuals, as far as I know. I'm not an expert in this one. It should be shipped as a category B. So your package would not change, whether you know the STI is positive in there, or you expect it, or you don't. You're still shipping it as a category B to the state lab. So a lot of things fall into that category B classification. I think
We're coming up here on time here. Should we, if there's any other last comments before we move to our post-course assessment?
Let me have any questions. I can't think of any points I want to flag at this point.
Thank you, everyone. We've really enjoyed having you with us today. We hope that you found this training to be valuable. As always, we're willing to answer questions and help you. Our customer service number, we provided that for you. Thank you for being with us, and we will end this training today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.